Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're super excited to have you here. Patty will be presenting and sharing her screen today with you. We have some slides that we prepared because we want this to be super clear. We know that myeloma is a super complex disease. It's not easy, and there's a lot to learn. So we want to make it as easy as possible for you, and that's why we're here today. Go ahead, Patty, to the next one. So as Audrey already mentioned, we're part of the HealthTree Cure Hub team. Cure Hub it's a HealthTree platform where you guys can track your myeloma, find your treatment options, find clinical trials, talk to your genetic twins, participate in forums, find some side effect solutions, and what everyone has voted. So today you'll see some screenshots from our labs section on HealthTree Cure Hub. We're not explaining the technicalities of how to enter everything, but we will be explaining how it's there. We have another webinar called Track Your Myeloma, where we already explain everything about how to enter your information, how we can help you. Audrey will be sharing that with you on that email. Okay, so this is the cool thing about a HealthTree Cure Hub is that you have this chart. And Patty, if you can show us the next slide, and you see your at the top you see your treatment, and then at the bottom you see the labs and how they're going up and down on each stage of your treatments and myeloma. So that's what we love about that. It's really empowering, it's really visual, and what we want for you guys is to really understand your myeloma and what it means. So we also have a table where you have the values and you can edit them, add them, delete them, and we can help you with that. You don't have to do that alone. I just want to mention before Patty and Arturo start explaining everything about your myeloma labs that we are here to help you. So we have a phone line that we'll be mentioning and showing at the end of the presentation. And what we want is to give you enough education that when you go to your doctor and the consultations with your doctors, you ask them more important questions, not the basic ones. We're here to answer all the basics, to explain everything, to explain what your numbers mean. Again, we do not give medical advice, as Audrey mentioned, but we are here to educate you and help you be really empowered and have all the knowledge before you go to your doctor. So I will leave you with Patty. Patty and Arturo will be explaining everything, and I hope you learn a lot.
So first of all, we are going to see the type of tests that we require so that you can get your lab tests done. So most of you already know this. We need a blood sample, a urine sample, and a bone marrow biopsy. And these samples will give us the results that we are going to talk about today. And it is really important to mention that by monitoring your labs, you can prevent end organ damage and significant disease. This is really helpful because by monitoring whether your important labs, especially the myeloma markers, if they are going up, if they are going down, or if they are remaining stable, we can take action and prevent disease progression. So this is why it's really important to know about the labs that we are going to talk today. And today we're not going to talk about how multiple myeloma works, but it is a type of cancer of plasma cells, and this is a fundamental thing that we need to take into account to understand all the labs that we are going to talk about. Okay, And these plasma cells that are being overproduced in multiple myeloma, they are proteins that are called immunoglobulins. As you can see in the structure that is presented in this picture, we can see that there are two parts for the immunoglobulins. In the middle green section, we can see the heavy chain. These heavy chains are the IgG, IgA, IgM, or also IgD and IgE. And the blue adjacent sections are called the light chains, and they can be either kappa or lambda. These are very important because number one, it will give you the subtype of multiple myeloma that you have. And number two, you will be able to see whether these are going up. So they will be a measure of indirect disease activity. Okay, so in HealthTree, we have divided the labs in sections. First, we have the myeloma markers, and then we have the rest of them. So to begin with, it's really important to know that the myeloma markers are the most important labs that you will present. And why is this? Because these are directly related to myeloma. The rest of the labs that we have are also in relation to how the disease can progress and can also give us an idea of whether there is being end organ damage. However, these are not specific to myeloma. This can be presented in other types of diseases. And so we would like to focus first on the myeloma markers, which are very important and relevant to know, especially if you want to monitor myeloma. So this is a zoom of the image that I just showed you. As Anna said, this is a really important graphic. Why? Because you will be able to compare it with the treatments that you are having, and you will see whether you are responding or not. So these are the myeloma markers. In the first example, you can see the M protein. It has other names also that we are going to see. And as you can see in the beginning, it was really high and it started going down over time. This is an idea of how you will be monitoring your labs, and it is a very visual way to see whether there is being progression, whether you are maybe entering relapse, or whether you are responding to treatment and maintaining stable. These are the myeloma markers. The M protein can be both urine and serum protein, the kappa and the lambda count, which are the light chains that we talked about, the kappa and lambda ratio, the bone marrow plasma cell percentage, and this is the one that we see in the bone marrow biopsy, and we will talk about that, and also the immunoglobulins. The ones that I presented in this picture are only A, G, and M, but there is also the option for entering IgD and IgE, which are some subtypes of multiple myeloma, but they are less frequent. Okay, now Arturo will continue.
Thank you. As Patty mentioned, myeloma cells are cancerous plasma cells. When they start carrying out the other blood cells in the bone marrow, like in the image on your right, you will find in the first image a normal bone marrow image. In the second one, there is plasma cells, myeloma cells, that are carrying out the other cells. So they take their space. Normal plasma cells secrete immunoglobulins. As Patty mentioned, immunoglobulins are proteins that attach to substances entering the body, and the body recognizes as foreign, like infections, and they help fight them. There are many different types, and they are specialized for different things. But in myeloma, these cells secrete abnormal immunoglobulins of only one type that cannot properly fight infections, called monoclonal proteins. As myeloma grows, these proteins also grow, carrying out other proteins of the immune system and reducing the ability to fight infections. The next slide. The test used to measure this protein is called protein electrophoresis. It can be done in the blood or in the urine. although the one in the urine is only being used at diagnosis and to confirm a remission, as it has been displaced by the light chain test that Patty will explain later. This monoclonal protein can be reported with multiple names, like M protein, M spike, abnormal band, paraprotein, and many other names. An easy way to identify this value is with the reference value of the test. A normal result is to have 0 monoclonal proteins. So this is the only result that should have a reference value of 0 or negative. These results will give us a baseline that can be followed to measure the response to your treatments. Another test that is usually used with the protein electrophoresis is the immunofixation, that is used to identify the type of monoclonal protein that is being produced by your myeloma. This test will identify the heavy chain and the light chain of the immunoglobulin. The most common type is IgG kappa, and Patty will explain later more about these parts.
So remembering the structure that we already mentioned about the immunoglobulin, which is the protein that is being overproduced by the plasma cells, one part of this structure is called the light chain. As I already mentioned, this light chain can be either kappa or lambda, the one that is being overproduced. And it is important to know your myeloma subtype in order to be able to monitor the relevant light chain. For example, if you are IgG kappa, you will want to focus on monitoring the kappa and the IgG. You will want to see whether they are remaining stable or if they are going up and up and up. And this is important so that you can see whether you are going into remission or you're having a relapse, if you're responding to treatment. That is why it's really important that you know your myeloma subtype. About 25% of myeloma patients will have a negative M-SPEP. So this means that the patient will not report any M spike in the blood or in the urine, but they will have a positive light chain. So even though the M spike is negative, that does not mean that the disease is not progressing. That is why it is important to understand all the labs so that you can know what the significance is in relation to the disease. So in this case, it's important to remember the light chain that you want to be looking for. And free light chains in the blood can help detect an early relapse. Sometimes there will not be osteolytic lesions, you will not have bone pain, but the free light chains will begin rising. So this is like an alert to pay attention to and see whether we are going back into a relapse, and that way you can take action sooner and let your doctor know so that they can take action. Another important lab is the light chain ratio. This is the division of the kappa light chains by the lambda light chains, and this gives us the ratio. So the normal range of this ratio is from 0.125 up until 8. If it's either above or below this range, it is considered an abnormality, even though the light chains could be within the range. So it needs to be investigated. And the light chain ratio is important for people who had kidney problems because often they have higher levels of light chains at baseline. So just by the kidney disease, at the beginning of multiple myeloma, they could have higher levels, which do not mean that it's because of the myeloma, but it's because of the kidney disease. So especially in people with kidney problems, it's important to focus on the ratio. And this is also important to focus on in the beginning, at the moment of diagnosis, because after that, you can only focus on the light chains from your subtype. And the other section of the immunoglobulin, the blue adjacent little chain, is called the heavy chain. And this is the one that gives us the other part of your myeloma subtype. So it can be IgG, IgA, IgM, and also IgD and E. It's important to mention that some patients will not have a rise in any of the heavy chains, so only light chains will increase, so that there's also this possibility. Now Arturo will continue with the plasma cell percentage.
Thanks. As we mentioned before, in myeloma, plasma cells will grow in the bone marrow, crowding out other cells. The normal percentage of the plasma cells found in the bone marrow is usually less than 5%. To find out if this percentage has increased, we use a bone marrow biopsy. This biopsy will help us identify the percentage of each population of blood cells in the bone marrow. We can classify the type of disorder with this measurement. MGUS having less than 10% of plasma cells and no signs of organ damage. Smolder myeloma is between 10 and 60%. Also with no signs of organ damage, and myeloma that is usually diagnosed with more than 10% of plasma cells and signs of organ damage, or when they have more than 60% of plasma cells in the bone marrow. To help us identify the different population of blood cells, we can use also immunohistochemistry. This means using an antibody stain that will identify a certain type of blood cells. In the case of plasma cells, it's called CD138. The next slide, please. Okay. Well, an easy way to understand your myeloma genetics is to think of the myeloma cell as a police department that is not working well. This department will have a nucleus or a bookshelf with all the rule books of how the department should behave. These rule books are what we know as chromosomes. We have 46 of them in each cell. And the rules written inside those books are the DNA. In myeloma cells, these books or rules may have multiple mistakes or mutations. There may be rules or parts of books missing or duplicated or other kinds of changes. These mutations may vary from person to person and might change over time. We will talk more about these alterations in another webinar, but what you have to know right now is that to identify these mistakes, there are multiple tests that can be used in your bone marrow biopsy. The flow cytometry that will help us identify if there are abnormal plasma cells in the biopsy. The FISH and cytogenetic tests that will help us identify if there are mistakes on the books. Maybe some books are missing, or maybe there are extra or other chapters. And the next generation sequencing, or NGS, and microarray. These are genomic tests that are usually used only in clinical trials, and that will tell us exactly how the rules written in the books might have been affected by the mutations. The next slide, please. In Cure Hub, we have a section where you can add all those different kinds of tests and find the meaning for each mutation found. If you need help adding those tests, we can gladly help you by adding them for you.
So another important thing that we need to take into account, and it's really important specifically at the moment of diagnosis, are the high-risk values. These specific labs are only relevant at the moment of diagnosis, so perhaps your doctor will not ask for them on the course of the disease, only in the moment of diagnosis. These high-risk values are the beta-2 microglobulin, the LDH or lactate dehydrogenase, and the albumin. So here we can see an example where we filled in our calculator. The beta-2 microglobulin was less than 3.5, the albumin as well. The FISH was reported as high risk and the LDH is normal. So this means that our ISS stage is stage 2. What does this mean? This means that our high-risk values are important to determine whether the course of multiple myeloma is high risk or standard risk. However, this is not deterministic, and patients that are considered high risk at the moment of diagnosis could have really good outcomes after the treatments. And the same is for patients that were considered standard risk. Some perhaps will not respond well to treatments. So even though the staging system is useful at the beginning, it is not deterministic, and it is important to take that into account. We will see an example of how you can get to know which RISS stage you are if you don't know it, but you do have the high risk values at diagnosis. So here we have our HealthTree dashboard. So you would go to diagnosis. This is what you will see. You can add a new diagnosis. This is the path to follow if you want to know your RISS stage. When we click there, we will see that we can add our multiple myeloma diagnosis, the month, the year, and the diagnosis. And you can see here where it says find my stage here, we will get the calculator. This is an example. We would have to fill in all the values. Remember, the beta-2 microglobulin at the moment of diagnosis, the albumin, the FISH test results, whether they are standard or high risk, and the LDH. After we do this, remember this is just an example, you will get on top your RISS stage is, and this example is stage 2, but depending on the values that you have or the ones that you enter, you will get your staging. And it is also important that you might have had reported a different stage depending on the staging system that your doctor uses. The one that we use is the revised international staging system, but there are multiple other systems. So if you think it's different from what your doctor told you, you can just ask us or consult your physician. But the one that we use is the revised one, so that you also know that. We can see there the result. And if you don't know whether your FISH test results are considered standard risk or high risk, you can also consult it here. You would just click on the little I for the additional information about the FISH test. And we can see here that the high risk is defined as either having a deletion 17p and or a translocation. And it is important to know and notice that there are different multiple types of translocations. So just make sure that you got the numbers right. The ones that would be considered high risk are either T414 or T1416 to be considered high risk. If you don't have this, you can just click on standard risk for the FISH test. Arturo?
Thanks. Well, CRAB is a mnemonic device used to remember how to identify organ damage in patients that have myeloma or a precursor to condition. A patient with symptomatic myeloma will usually have at least one of these signs. C for high calcium, R for renal insufficiency that is detected with lab values reporting a reduction of your kidney function, A for anemia that is usually reported with a decrease in the hemoglobin, or B for bone lesions that are usually reported in an X-ray survey, a CT scan, or a PET-CT. The following slide, please. In Cure Hub, you can follow these values along with your myeloma labs and see if they're improving or getting worse to choose what your next step is going to be. The next slide, please. As we have mentioned many times before, multiple myeloma crowds out the bone marrow, causing many types of blood deficiencies. The most commonly known is anemia, a shortage of red blood cells that can be identified by the decrease of hemoglobin. These cells carry the oxygen through the whole body. So when there is a deficiency, you may look pale, feel tired, dizzy, or confused. Another kind of deficiency is called thrombocytopenia, a shortage of platelets. Platelets are cells that form clots and stop or prevent bleeding. So when there is a shortage, it increases the risk of bleeding. Then we have the shortage of white blood cells, or leukopenia. These cells are the ones that fight infections. And there are many types that specialize in different kinds of defenses. So when these cells are diminished, it is much easier to have an infection. The most common type of these cells is the neutrophils and the lymphocytes. On your right, you will find the normal range of the cell populations. And it's important to remark that this may vary from lab to lab. So make sure to follow the ones reported by your lab. Okay, and lastly, we have the chemistry panels. These tests are taken regularly to check your body's functions. There are many of them, but we'll focus on the ones that are affected by myeloma. When the monoclonal proteins start to crowd out the other proteins, one of the first to show signs is the albumin. Why? Because it is one of the most abundant proteins in the humans. Then, when the plasma cells start to destroy the bone, the calcium produced gets into the bloodstream, causing hypercalcemia, high calcium, that may cause symptoms like constipation, loss of appetite, bone weakness, drowsiness, confusion. And lastly, as Patty mentioned, when there is a severe increase in light chains, they start damaging your kidneys, shown by an elevated serum creatinine and a decrease in your creatinine clearance. We also have a table with the reference values, but as we said before, make sure to follow the ones reported by your lab. It's important to mention that the blood counts and chemistry panels might be affected by causes other than myeloma. So if you notice an important change, it's important to consult your doctor to find the underlying cause. Thank you.
And at last, we have our summary. So the most important key points that we can get from what we already talked about. So remember that it is very important to know what type of myeloma you have. Remember, this is given by your heavy and light chains, the ones that are increased. This way you will be able to know which values to look for when you want to see disease progression, to see if you are responding to treatment, and to prevent an early relapse. Secondly, keep your labs up to date. This is very important because the graphic that you will see in HealthTree, it is dependent on the data entry points. The more labs you have, the more accurate the graph will look, and the more accurately you will be able to track your lab results and therefore the disease progression. Then it's important to monitor your labs. So we already made sure that you have them up to date. Now it's important to monitor them. Of course, your healthcare team are going to be monitoring, but in order for you to be an empowered patient, you need to know what's the status of your labs, why is happening what is happening, and to see if you need a change in treatment, maybe an increase in dose, and so that you can have these conversations with your doctor. Remember, it's especially important to monitor the myeloma markers because these are indirect measures of the activity of the disease. And at last, keep learning. We have multiple resources at HealthTree University, and becoming an empowered patient, of course, requires a lot of learning so that you can ask better questions to your doctor and know what you would need to do in case something happened, if there is a relapse, what options do you have? And of course, it's really important. And now, this is the end of our presentation, and we will go on with the questions. Thank you.
Thank you. That was so fun. I really enjoy events like these because I feel like, as you said, Patty, near the end, this is one of the first steps, tangible steps that they can take in becoming an empowered patient, is understand what's going on with the disease, and you can do that by monitoring your labs. Thank you, Arturo, Patty, Anna, for organizing that. The slides were very easy to follow, and I'm excited to share them in the follow-up email. As Patty mentioned, it's now time for your questions. We'd love to hear from you. If you're new to Zoom, there is a question and answer box near the bottom of your screen. If you need to hover over our faces to see it, it's near the bottom. And we'd love to get different questions from you regarding how to better understand your myeloma labs. So I'll ask the question and then you three can decide who wants to answer it, if that's okay. Sue is wondering, is the IMM the same as the M protein, M spike, and monoclonal protein?
Yes, Sue. The M spike has a lot of names, and it usually depends on your facility or the lab, but it is the same. It's M protein, M spike. Sometimes it is just reported as an M. Sometimes it's reported as paraprotein, and depending on your facility or on the labs that you get, we can help you identify which is the value that corresponds to the M spike. There is usually that result because multiple myeloma patients need that. So if you would like us to go ahead and check your labs for you, or you have any questions, we can definitely do that and help you with that.
Thank you. I think it's so funny because myeloma is such a complicated and unique disease as it is. And then on top of that, people are using different terminologies in the lab. So it is complicated, and we're glad you're here learning more about it, because if we could just have universal terminology, that would be great. But thank you for being here to learn more. Lara is wondering if we could please summarize what the myeloma markers are.
Well, so the most important markers are the M spike, the light chains, and the immunoglobulins. The ones that you want to follow depend on the type of your myeloma. For example, if you have IgG kappa multiple myeloma, you want to follow the kappa light chains, the immunoglobulin G, and the M spike.
Awesome. Gonna get my mouse to work. That if you want to also type that, Arturo, as a response to her, that way people can see it in the chat as well. So I learn by hearing, but my husband learns by reading. So let's just try to keep that available in all response versions. Anna, if you want to answer the question, any way to automatically sync labs from my chart?
Yeah. Hi. So I am currently looking at your profile. Unfortunately, Froedtert and Medical College only allows for Wisconsin right now, not Milwaukee. So not for now. That would be through Apple Health, and that's the automatic option that we currently have. Good news is that we're working on more options. Our tech team is working hard to develop all the automatic options for you guys, so we can keep just having more facilities available. What you can do and what we can help with is every time that you get new labs, or especially important labs, and you need help with those, you can email us at support@healthtree.org, and we'll be really happy to add those for you. At HealthTree Cure Hub, it's important that you understand your labs, that you know how to add them, just for you to be empowered. But we understand that sometimes you're not feeling okay, maybe you're not tech savvy, maybe you have too much on your plate, and that's what we're here for. We're here to help you. So if you email us and you ask us to update your labs, we'll be really happy to help.
Awesome, thank you. Michelle is wondering if the kappa lambda ratio is still in the normal range, but the kappa is going up. Is this a concern for an IgG kappa patient? So Patty or Arturo, can you take that one?
Yeah, sorry, I was typing another answer.
Mhm.
Yeah, actually the ratio is the most important at the beginning, at the moment of diagnosis. Sometimes the kappa light chains will increase, even though the ratio is still normal. So actually, it just means that maybe the kappa light chains mean that the disease could be waking up, and it just means that we need to keep monitoring them. When the ratio is abnormal, it means that the comparison of the kappa and the lambda is really big. So there is a huge difference, and that just means that one of the light chains is getting affected. But yeah, it definitely can be that the kappa light chains or the lambda light chains are going up and the ratio remains normal for a period of time. And it's important to, one, keep monitoring, and two, and very important, to always ask your physician about it and see what's the next thing to do or to check, or what would be the options if there was a relapse.
Yeah, I completely agree. Dr. Gareth Morgan, who is a multiple myeloma specialist in New York, when he was asked this question, responded, we really are concerned about drastic changes. So if it's a drastic increase, that's something that we want to be paying attention to. That isn't to say don't consult with your doctor if you see it climbing, or don't pay attention, but also try not to lose a lot of sleep if you see minimal changes. And like Patty said, the important part is that you're aware of that, you keep monitoring it, and that you're in constant communication with your physician about it. So just wanted to share a little bit of multiple myeloma specialist answer to that one as well. Let's talk about the dashboard. So patient says, I've had my labs entered and I'm curious about that dashboard stage that's shown. Is that done automatically? Anna, do you want to answer that question?
Sure. Yes, that's done automatically. It's a new feature, but maybe that might be a reason why you didn't see it when you did it. I'll be really happy to help you and contact you. Someone from our team will contact you personally, and so you can have a call with us and we can find out the stage that our dashboard gives you.
Thank you. Arturo, Michelle is wondering, you mentioned IgG kappa as well as an example of a type of myeloma. Is it possible to switch to an IgGA lambda in the future?
Myeloma is a heterogeneous disease. It's different from people to people, but also different inside your myeloma.
Mm-hmm.
You can have many different kinds of myeloma cells in your body. When you have a treatment, sometimes the treatment kills all the myeloma cells from one certain type, but then another type remains, and maybe this starts to grow. This is when we can say that there is a change, but there are many factors to take into account, and it's better that you ask your doctor if this is the case for you.
Awesome, thank you. Mike is wondering, how can the effects of drug treatment upon test results be distinguished from those of the myeloma? For example, most patients on Revlimid become anemic sooner or later. That's a great question, Mike.
Well, usually the main way to identify these changes are if there are treatment changes. You can see from the start of the treatment to if there is an increase in the dose or a decrease, you will see these changes in your labs. But when it's a problem because of the myeloma, it will not be determined by the changes of the treatments.
Yeah, thank you. I wish there was a better answer, right? That here's how to exactly distinguish. It's just being vigilant and paying attention. Was there any significant change in my treatment, and just kind of being self-aware of what's happening with you in regards to when you got your labs. Patty, Laura's wondering, it was mentioned that the M spike can be negative, but the light chain positive. Does that mean that the myeloma is not necessarily in remission?
Actually, it's a tricky question because there are some patients that never get an M spike. It's a different type of myeloma, which is called nonsecretory multiple myeloma. They never get an M spike detected, but they could get the kappa or the lambda light chains reported. Then yes, there are criteria for complete remission, and it takes into account all the lab values. So a patient that previously had an M spike and now it's gone to 0, but they still have a rise in the light chains, either kappa or lambda, it could mean that there is still disease activity.
Awesome, thank you. Laura's wondering, in general terms, an IgG lambda standard risk, because it's standard risk, can we comment on how good or bad that is of a diagnosis?
No, actually, the thing is, in the past, they did studies of prognosis and outcomes as of years of survival, but that has extremely changed over the last few years, and those studies do not apply anymore because of the new treatments and the differences that have been taken in the last few years in advancements in multiple myeloma treatments, clinical trials. So actually, they do not apply anymore. That is why I said that even though you can be considered either standard risk or high risk, it is not deterministic. It just gives your physician an idea of whether a patient could potentially have problems responding to treatment, so they are prepared and see what would be the course of action if they didn't respond to treatment. If it's standard risk, what they hope is that they will respond well to treatments and stay in remission for a long time. And also, somebody asked, which is in relation to this, and I already answered, but I'm gonna say it again. They asked about the MRD, and that is the minimal residual disease. We didn't mention it today because today we wanted to focus in the newly diagnosed. So the ones that you would monitor first when you were recently diagnosed, that is why we focused on the high risk values and the ones that you want to keep monitoring. But the minimal residual disease, it is measured to see how well a treatment works. And this is because even though regular tests won't detect plasma cells, there could still be a few plasma cells. And MRD detects this. It is done either by flow cytometry, PCR, and next generation sequencing. These tests are more sensitive, and it's a way for us and for your physicians and for you to see if you responded to treatment. If it's negative, it means that a really good test that it's very sensitive could not detect the plasma cells, or they were below the range. If it's positive, it means that there's some still plasma cells remaining. And it does not matter if you were standard risk or high risk. What matters is how you respond to treatment. So that's why we cannot answer like outcomes or prognosis. It's just to give you an idea of what's to come.
Thank you, Patty. That was a great answer. Patty did mention, because there's been such progress in the last couple of years, that has changed the answers and kind of put out of date past studies. And I want you to know, and I'm sensitive when I say this, but there's no better time to be diagnosed with myeloma, even though it's not a good time to be diagnosed with myeloma. It's never a good time to be diagnosed with myeloma. There couldn't have been a better time to be diagnosed because of the amazing and accelerating research that's happening in this field, the new treatments that are being discovered that are less harmful than previous treatments and more effective. So just know that in terms of the cancers you could have gotten and the timing of the cancer, and I do say that sensitively because I know that it's never a good time, but just to have hope that there is a lot of progress being done in this field. Anna, Bob was wondering if just a little bit more about, do they send you the lab results to get started, or what's that first step to get started?
Yeah, sure, Bob. So just I'll mention that we have another webinar on that, and Audrey will be sharing with you if you have further questions, or if you want more details about our process. But there are different ways. So yes, you can send them by email if you want to. Again, our email is support@healthtree.org. You can also sign our consent, and we'll take care of everything. We'll request your records, and once we get them, we'll enter everything. You can give us patient portal access, so we can access your patient portal, such as My Chart, My Health Plus, if you have any, and we can enter them from there. I just realized that you do have a HealthTree account, and your agent is Ashley. She will be contacting you soon today, and she'll be happy to answer all your questions and help you with the process. Whatever is best for you and easier for you, we can work with that, and she'll be explaining with detail and answering every question that you have.
Thank you. And just a testament to this team. They get it done. They're very personal. They're very kind. So please don't hesitate in reaching out. A couple more questions before we end. Michelle is wondering, what do we know an average M spike of myeloma patients when they're diagnosed? Just the average overall. And if we don't know that, then that's okay.
No, it varies a lot. It can be too big or too low. It changes from patient to patient.
Yeah. Lawrence is wondering what significance, is any, is the SIFE test results or quants? I'm not familiar with this, but I'm sure you guys are.
The immunization test results are the one that I explained earlier. These tests help us to identify the type of myeloma. They're quite sensitive, but they're not quite definitive. They give us an idea of how the disease is working. There are some drugs, for example, that might show in this kind of test, but there are some kinds of immunization tests that identify the difference between M spike reported because of daratumumab or some kind of this drug, or the M spike reported because of the myeloma.
Awesome, thank you. Let's go to a couple more questions. Just a lot of thank yous to you and your team for this amazing presentation. And this is something I think that can benefit all myeloma patients. You know, we did this for the newly diagnosed myeloma patients chapter, but even as time goes on, it's still important to be monitoring your labs. And as Patty said, there's all of a sudden, you know, when you reach that first remission, you want to know, well, how deep of a remission really is it? So then there's MRD to pay attention to, and then there's MRD to pay attention to if you notice that your numbers are climbing. And it evolves over time. But our purpose, the purpose of the event and the purpose of our organization is to help you become an empowered patient. And that first step that you can take in becoming an empowered patient is understanding what is going on with your myeloma, what numbers should you be paying attention to, and therefore come in partnership with your doctor or in your nurses and your treating physicians. On the screen, we see the email for Anna's team, the patient experience team, and the number as well. feel free to call that number or email, and they can be in contact with you in order to help you. I don't know if you guys have any more comments on that.
Yeah, we can't stress enough how we're willing to help you. Really, we're here for you. We want to help. We want to answer all your questions. We have a lot of resources. We have all the chapters that Audrey is leading, and they're great. We have HealthTree University. We have articles. We have the roundtables. But sometimes we also need a personal connection, and we need answers to our personal questions. Again, we do not give medical advice, but we for sure can explain what your numbers mean and your treatments and everything. So please, we're here to help you, and we'll be really happy to do it. And we have a lot of resources in Cure Hub. You can find your twin, you can see treatment options, and so you can have the list before going to your physician. Clinical trials, as Audrey said, there are a lot of things happening right now, and that can be useful too.
Perfect, thank you. I did want to mention I will be sending out that email as well as the phone number in our follow-up email. That follow-up email is going to be chock full of awesome resources. It's going to contain that Track Your Myeloma previously recorded webinar that explains a little bit more HealthTree Cure Hub and how to enter your information and how they validate your profiles and things like that. And then we also have HealthTree University that we're going to be sharing with you so that you can learn the basics of myeloma from multiple myeloma specialists themselves. Our team has gone in, recorded these multiple myeloma specialists speaking about important topics ranging from basic to actually incredibly complex topics that you can educate yourself on at your own pace for free in HealthTree University. The slides will be included that were shared today that they did an awesome job of. I'm just fangirling over those slides. They were great. And we're also going to include this recording for those who are interested in rewatching a part, or if you weren't able to make it, watching it maybe for the first time. I will finish with a couple of outro announcements. So we went over the questions. Our next month's meeting is going to be on September 29th, and we are going to be talking about common induction therapies. How does the oncologist or multiple myeloma specialist decide which induction therapy is right for his or her patient? And this is extremely important, as we have been talking about, because more and more myeloma treatments are being approved and developed and researched. And so the oncologist now has more options in their arsenal to decide, okay, I think this will be right for my patient. So how do they decide? Dr. Benjamin Diamond will be joining us to explain this topic. You may be interested in other upcoming Myeloma Crowd community events that we have. On Tuesday, August 24th at 1 p.m., we're having our Nutrition and Wellness for Myeloma chapter. Plant Powered Metro New York is a foundation in New York that is focused on getting communities and the entire nation more focused on a whole food plant-based diet. And we have learned throughout the year in our Nutrition and Wellness for Myeloma chapter that studies have shown that the whole food plant-based diet is one of the most beneficial and successful diets for those who are immunocompromised, or for anybody really. So this event's going to be exciting because they're going to be talking to us about the practical approach to this diet. What foods do you need in your pantry? What recipes can we make with these kind of foods? So I'm really excited about that, and we look forward to seeing you there if you can make it. If you can't make it, you can always sign up and receive the recording. Wednesday, August 25th at 1 p.m. Central is the African American Myeloma chapter. Dr. Scott Goldsmith, who is new at the City of Hope, he's a multiple myeloma specialist as well, is going to be giving us a Genetics 101 presentation. And then Friday, August 27th at 1 p.m. Eastern is our immunotherapy myeloma treatment chapter. And this is one of the categories of myeloma treatment that is being researched and developed at an accelerated pace. immunotherapy is an amazing way to treat patients that is significantly less harmful than chemotherapy. I will let the specialists tell you the rest, but Dr. Melon Holtkrantz is joining us. He's a multiple myeloma specialist as well, giving us a bispecific antibody review. Bispecific is one of the treatments within immunotherapy. So the link to sign up for any of those events and even more events I haven't mentioned today is found at the bottom of this slide and will be sent out in the follow-up email within 48 hours of the event's completion. Another thank you to our sponsors, Bristol Myers Squibb, Amgen Oncology, Genentech, Adaptive Biotechnologies, Sanofi Oncopeptides, Karyopharm Therapeutics, and Takeda Oncology. And thank you to each of you for helping us build a strong myeloma crowd community. We appreciate you and hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.